great-granddaughter of Thomas McCurtain, describe how the role of women in our revolutionary past has often been overlooked. Well, our next story goes back 2 years earlier to 1918, when women had to struggle for the right to vote.
The word suffrage means the right to vote in political elections. But the right of women to vote was a hard-won battle and was eventually achieved through protest.
It's hugely important. 1918 is the culmination of a campaign that began in the 1860s. Women had been, starting on by asking for the vote, asking politely, writing petitions, meeting politicians, pleading their case, and gradually, as they had no response, the campaign escalates until we finally, in Ireland, by 1912, have a militant campaign because all the constitutional paths have been closed down.
We can see from the printed material of the time that those involved in the suffrage movement were portrayed in a very negative light.
These postcards are mainly anti-suffrage postcards. They show the kind of propaganda that's going on at the time to discredit any women that are involved in the suffrage movement. And these are the kind of things that the public are seeing on a daily basis. So you see suffragettes that are described really as silly things that really aren't to be dealt with. We see them shown as ugly women who are unfashionable, who a lot of the time there is a hint that these women are only involved in suffrage because they didn't get a husband and they don't have anything to occupy themselves with.
At this time, Ireland was still under British rule, and those involved in the Irish suffrage movement were in contact with their British counterparts and travelled to the UK to take part in rallies.
They had a common struggle, which was to get a bill for women's suffrage passed through Westminster. So, for example, when the WSPU, the Pankhurst organisation, organised big mass demonstrations in London, Irish women would go over there, they would have their Irish platform, they'd wear green, they would be very distinctive. And in fact, 18 women from Ireland also served prison terms in Holloway jail because they went on militant raids, for example, smashing department store windows in Oxford Street. Margaret Cousins was one of them. They were very much part of that set, and they said that the WSP helped them to understand what the militant role would be when they undertook it in Ireland later on.
What we have over here on this side is an image that shows an Irish suffrage group who is in London at a mass rally. And we can see lots of nationalist imagery going on in this photograph. We can see the women are carrying shamrocks. We have an Irish piper here leading the group. And behind that we can see that there are women carrying Irish harps. So here we have two women that we know. This is Hannah Stephenson, who is from one of the founders of the Irish Women's Franchise League and a suffragette. Hannah is wearing her graduate robes. They follow the tradition of the English suffragettes who would wear their graduate robes in processions to show that they were college graduates and they were middle-class, respectable women rather than these wild women that people may have seen in anti-suffrage propaganda. But Hannah has accessorised her graduate robes with Celtic designs. You can see here at the top, at the waist and at the sleeves. So she's added an Irish element to her graduate robes. And then if we come to the left here, we see Geraldine Lennox again, who is a Women's Social and Political Union member. Originally came from Cork, but worked in London and worked on the suffragette newspaper over there. And Geraldine would have looked after any of the Irish groups who came over to London to march. It would have been one of her responsibilities to organise the Irish groups.
While the Irish suffrage movement had close links with the UK movement, their goal was also independence from Britain. And this affected the relationship between both organisations.
Ireland's never straightforward, so although a lot of women might have wanted the vote, some of them said, but it's more important to get independence first, and so that there was a difference of opinion between some nationalist women and feminist women, particularly when the Home Rule Bill is going through Westminster. But once that's gone through by 1914, although it's then parked because of the war, there is less of a distinction between, for example, Constance Markievicz and Hannah Skeffington. They wanted women to have the vote, but they also wanted Irish independence. But it is a very difficult issue sometimes as what you would prioritise. But Hannah's point was that the Home Rule Bill was only for men and that women had to keep pressing their claim.
Author and columnist Martina Devlin writes about the women involved in the suffrage movement, who pushed the boundaries and shaped Ireland.
100 years ago, an exceptional group of women were active. Women like Countess Markievicz, Maud Gonne, Dr. Kathleen Lynn, Alice Milligan. These women were radical. They were sticks of dynamite. And what struck me is they've been submerged, forgotten, reduced to two-dimensional figures. And I thought this was an injustice because we have a warped sense of our history. I mean, we are walking in the footprints of these women. And sometimes if we remember them at all, it's as the sisters of, daughters of, mothers of, lovers of, and not for the extraordinary achievements in their own right, which have helped to shape the Irish state.
Constance Gore Booth, better known as Countess Markievicz, was one of the remarkable women from this period.
She's one of my heroes. She straddles three great movements which were operational at the same time. There was the movement for national independence, for labour rights, and for votes and political representation for women. And she believed in all three. What I've noticed about a number of these women, like for example Dr. Kathleen Lynn, who was out in 1916 with her lifelong partner Madeleine French-Mullen, was that the Republican movement really squeezed them out, and they focused their attention then on other areas. Kathleen Lynn and Madeleine French-Mullen moved into the area of health, for example. Others moved into education or internationalism. You know, it was a wasted opportunity, I think, for the state. But Dr. Kathleen Lynn was one of the first women in Ireland to get a university education, to qualify as a doctor. Before that, women had to go abroad if they wanted to train as doctors. And she worked among the Dublin poor largely. She was an amazing woman, and we don't do enough to remember these women.
The story of how Irish women finally won the right to vote, and that was only 100 years ago. Well, that's our programme for this evening. Thank you very much for watching, and stay safe and well.